Hi everyone. Welcome to this, I guess, second to last round of talks. Um, Thank you for coming to my talk. This is Inara's Banquet, or a slide that has the words Inara's Banquet on it. Inara's Banquet is a show that I did in February of this year. It's an immersive and interactive theater performance based on an ancient Hittite myth. And today I was like struggling to figure out an angle to talk about this big project because I am an Assyriologist who has gone into game design, who is now kind of moving into film and interactive theater, and they're all connected to me in the sense that they work with site-specific dramaturgy and items and environmental storytelling and human interaction with our environments. But, you know, it's a lot. Uh, so what I decided on was that I just wanted to discuss my process with you about how I went into making a show based on source materials that people might not be familiar with. So this was the advertisement for the show. This is about everything that audience members would know prior to going into Inara's Banquet. Really big headline: an ancient ritual revived. Inara's Banquet is a segment of the Hittite myth of Illuyanka, revived as an immersive and interactive performance. Okay, we've got ancient ritual, we've got immersive and interactive, setting some expectations here. Some content. Cosmic order in the Anatolian heartland has been corrupted, and at the root of it all lie the maleficent activities of the demon snake Illuyanka. Tensions at the dinner table run high when Inara, the Hittite goddess of the hunt, challenges him to a battle. So we have our two main characters here, and we have our immersive setting, a dinner table. And then we have a call to action, basically. Whose side will you choose? So we are appealing to agency, or at least some form of interactivity. So, I mean, we're here at NarraScope, so I think most of you probably know what immersive theater is, but 100% you know what interactivity is, a certain sense of responsivity when people put in things into a system. But I'm not sure if people know about the Illuyanka myth. And I'm not going to tell you just yet. So, in case you don't know what immersive theater is, I just decided to describe it as theater that actively uses audience members' individual spatial positionalities as a storytelling device. So basically, it's theater where you can walk around in a space. And there are various, an immersion I find is a very, and I think you would agree, it's a bit of a misleading buzzword. Immersion is, there are many ways to achieve a state of immersion, which is the sense of a visceral and emotional excitement and like really, really being engaged with some sort of source material. Like play can also be immersive in the same way that a story can be immersive, or walking around. Like your awareness is heightened, I would say, is a hallmark of immersion. And when we talk about immersive theater, it's obviously often opposed to traditional proscenium theater, where people are seated and watch a story unfold from a set place in a space. Now, narratively speaking, there is one important common thread when we talk about immersive theater, and that is that a lot of the source materials are canonical in the sense that these stories live in our collective consciousness. So these are some shows that are like immersive shows that are really popular or that I went to recently. We have two Punch Drunk shows. We have Sleep No More, which is Macbeth, and The Burnt City, which is based on the Iliad. Last week, I went to Oscar and the Crown at the Crown, which is based on Oscar Wilde's life and his stories, which is it's like a musical immersive where you walk around. And lastly, I included Key of Dreams, which is a 2-day immersive interactive experience in Wales based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Now, why is that? So the fact is that we can move around in these plays. So the scenography is traversable. A risk of that is same way as that is in games, that any content can be missed. You want to encourage this feeling of liberty and freedom and walking around. But you also want people to be able to make sense of what they're seeing. So the narrative structure of a lot of these immersive shows is that they're fragmentary and non-linear, but that they're also looping. So you'll have like larger casts that are acting out smaller sections or sub-stories of a meta story, and you can kind of dip in and out into different segments of a story. And the fact that these texts are roughly familiar with people is useful because it provides a reference point to which we can anchor these things that we observe. As for Hittite mythology, who's familiar with Hittite mythology? Nice. Yeah, so maybe not as canonical, unless you've spoken to me a lot. I do talk about the Hittites occasionally. I did a master's in it. So the Hittite Empire had its height in the 13th century BC. And even though we might not know a lot about the Hittites themselves, or I mean, we, as in you, they share a lot of cultural, cultural artifacts and with the Greeks and the ancient Mesopotamians. So there are definitely in their mythology certain through lines that we can see. The way that their pantheon is divided and the way that the gods are represented and the perceptions of the people regarding how they should and how people interact with these gods. And now I'll tell you about the myth of Illuyanka. So the myth of Illuyanka was one of the famous festival texts that the Hittites had. So it's a myth about the reversal of order and the restoration of order. And you can see that in the structure of the myth as well, where we start with a situation in which we have a certain status quo, then a new character is introduced. This character messes up this certain status quo. All the agents of chaos are punished, and then we have a new order. And this myth was performed at the Paruli festival. So Hittite society, its calendar and its like social structure was based on these yearly, monthly festivals. The Paruli festival was one of the big four. It was a spring festival, and it was celebrated every 9 years. It started in the Hittite capital, Hattusha, and then it had a lot, the king would be involved in this, and they would travel around and end in this cultural religious site, Nerik. And we have two versions of this text. So both of them start with a mythological section and end with a ritualistic section, which to me immediately was very interesting because the rites that are described in the last piece of the text correspond to a lot of the actions that are described in a mythological text. So there is like that relationship between the myth itself and the things that the people who are observing this myth are actually acting out. So, like, we're talking about redefining the order of the gods by placing statues, drinking, breaking bread. I was going to say Breaking Bad. And yeah, things like that. And so, what's the myth about? Like, so it's about the restoration of order, but how is this acted out? So we have the priest Kella who tells the story or introduces the story. I said there are two versions. In the one version, it's more of like an oration. In the second version of the story, it's very clear that this myth was performed by priests and ritualistic practitioners. And basically what happens is the storm god, who is also the head of the Hittite pantheon, is challenged by the demon snake Illuyanka to a battle, and he loses that battle. And that ushers in an era of chaos and drought. And Inara is the storm god's daughter. She is the goddess of the hunt, and she wants to come up with a plan to reinstate her father's rule and punish Illuyanka. And she does this by organizing a banquet at which she plans to invite, to which she invites Illuyanka, wants to get him drunk, and then asks or enlists this innocent human, Hupasha, to kill the demon. And then we wrap it up with the ritual. So myth and ritual in Hati, like I said, we have this interesting correlation between rites and performance and myth. So a lot of research has been done into what the function of rituals is in any society, really, because they usually bring about or are meant for social cohesion or like establishing rules of how a certain society works. The traditional view of what rituals do, the function of them. So basically, the priest says, by presenting or reciting the primeval ecological occurrence of a natural disaster in terms of a supernatural event, the stage is set for a certain ritual procedure designed to ward off a specific occurrence of this same disaster. So basically, we take a narrative, we take a narrative form, a myth, we describe some sort of horrible, terrible event that could be a threat to our society, and then we describe it in this myth, and we perform it in front of people, and then we come up with a ritual to ward off that fear, and that way we feel stronger and more cohesive, essentially. So the Illuyanka myth is an etiological explanation for chaos, fortune, adversity, and maybe threats to kingship. And that made me think about the design seed for Inara's banquet as to what was the exact thing that I wanted to explore when I was making this show. And the question that I tried to answer was, how can I develop a version of this ritualistic procedure, i.e. one that explores the balance and restoration of order and chaos, for a contemporary audience? My answer was Hupasha, the innocent human who is ordered to kill a god. So, like I said, the play was immersive. We set it in a restaurant. We had a long table. On the one end, we had Inara, and on the other end, essentially, at some point, we have Illuyanka, and all the humans were seated. All the humans, all the participants were seated along the table, as either helpers of Inara, Hupashas, or as Illuyanka's sons, because she invites Illuyanka and his sons to come to the dinner party. And the main considerations that I thought about as I was started out building this play was, for the audience experience, was what's their role? What's the role of the audience? So we clearly already from the get-go we have this conflict of like, which god do you side with? I was thinking about actions. As a game designer, and you want this to be interactive, you have to be very intentional about the types of actions that people can take and the results that these actions might bring about. And I also wanted to be really considerate and clear on what the overarching emotional experience would be, and also how that would change based on which god you would side with. So in traditional immersive theater, audiences are generally observers of these linear vignettes, and in interactive theater, I would say audiences are often co-performers, or at least they're very much encouraged to speak and improv with the actors. It's very much on the spectrum of LARPing as well. And for Inara's banquet, because we are dealing with a cultural context that people are so unfamiliar with, I didn't think that would be, I didn't think either would do, would reach the effect that I wanted it to have. So I was looking for somewhere in between. So, and I thought structure is where I have to start, because I already had the content of the myth, right? But the structure was the main point. So the Illuyanka myth has a very clear structure of order, chaos, a new sense of order. I thought I can copy that structure in my play. So I started with a linear story. Then I had a large improvised section, and then I ended with a linear ending to bring it all together. But this kind of makes it look like we have a start and an ending, and everything that happens in between doesn't matter. And interactivity is determined by the level of responsiveness, right, to any audience input. And also, my now new #1 rule of narrative design is that the disillusion of choice kills immersion quicker than a badly executed death on stage. So, which we desperately tried to avoid. And I am personally somewhat obsessed, and maybe some people here as well, with the interplay of narratives, specifically modular narrative and meta-narrative structures, and how you can move in between those different levels by designing choice in an interesting way. So I added a choice. And this is how my structure reflected the dramatic tension. So we have our linear initial part, which is the onboarding. Then we have our improvised section, which is immersion through an individualistic gamified experience. Then we bring all of the immersive or individual experience back together through a collaborative and collective choice. And then based on that choice, we have a certain outcome, which is then again linear and shared. So let's start with the onboarding. The function of onboarding was really important in Inara's Banquet because there was a huge dichotomy difference between the real world and the world that I was trying to invite people to participate in. So I used it to establish a sense of cultural familiarity and to encourage the suspension of disbelief. And I had a few tools that I used. Most importantly, a facilitator. I had invitational objects, tokens. I used ritualistic transitions, which sounds really creepy, actually. And I used theories of embodiment for that. So the facilitator. So this transition from the real world into the world of the gods cannot be black to white. It has to be gradual. And using a facilitator as a bridge between those two worlds is a really effective and neutral way to do that. I was the facilitator. I started out as my role as welcoming the people into the space, because there are different barriers and levels of this immersion that we're going through, right? The first step is actually stepping into the restaurant that is not a restaurant at this moment. But so that's part one. So getting people to come inside, welcoming them, hang up their coats. Then as everyone's seated, I would get this book and I would start reading from this book, which contained context for of Hittite history. And gradually I would morph more and more into my role, where eventually I turned into Kella, the priest. And I had some signifiers that showed that, for example, like a mask. And I had a big printout of the original text to get people to understand that this was not something where they only observed, but where they were also encouraged to actively walk around and change their perspective on the room. Like everything in the room matters. So then secondly, we had these invitational tokens, almost objects that people got in the beginning, and then they were told to hold on to these. These tokens were used later in the play to make the choice to side with a god, but it gives them something to hold on to, right? And it also already predicts what is about to happen, or gives you, Then transition and embodiment. So this initial onboarding process, I wrapped it up by actually printing this and then reading out loud some of the first lines of the actual myth, and then having the audience chant them back to me, which was really cool, because they were the actual lines from the play. And then I put on a mask and I changed my role to that of priest. And then we introduce both of the characters. They have a discussion, and we kick off the improvised section, which is more gamified. And so what was this improvisation section for? Well, I wanted this to be a truly interactive experience, and I believe that if you have too much narrative content, something like interactivity has to go on the back burner, vice versa. If you want something to be immersive through interactivity, you cannot have too much narrative imposed onto a section. So that's why this was where I implemented this. It was also a part of active learning, really, where we've given the audience members a lot of information, and now it's time for them to take that information and explore it further on their own terms. So 3 main things: events and intentions for the actors, are how they would fill out this time. I identified after the first play, because I did it twice in my first work in progress round, 3 player types, and kind of facilitating experiences for all of them, and thinking about the types of actions. So events and intentions, we have these 2 main characters. They have very clear backstories, they have goals, they have things they want and ways they go about to get these things. There were various events outside of their own lives, or outside of their own goals and motivations, that would influence the things that they did, and these events could be triggered by certain things that audience members did. I identified 3 player types. Explorers, so people that were really interested, and these were mainly people who had we were very familiar with playing games, so they wanted to explore the space, find trinkets, do puzzles, and I wanted them to be able to do that and reward them narratively with content to learn more about these 2 gods. There were socializers, so people who I think have a more LARPy or interactive immersive theater interests, and they would usually either talk to other audience members, which was a big part of the show, or to the actors. And observers, people who are probably more introverted or prefer to just watch. And I did not want anyone to feel any sense of shame or inadequacy, because that will also break immersion. So that was another option. These are some of the actions that people could take. So there were specific tasks that were given by the actors. I was tracking down who was forging alliances with who as the priest, and the way that you could forge an alliance was by getting a god's token, but then you could only have 1 token at a time, and the only way that you could get a token back was by answering certain riddles and doing certain tasks to kind of try to gain the grace, regain the grace from another god. There were puzzles, like I said, riddles, artifacts, conversational mysteries, and I guess that all ties in with a sense of intrigue, because we're having a dinner party, so there's gossip and we're all mingling about, and we all want to know who these gods are, and who can be trusted and who should not be trusted. Basically, neither can be trusted. But so the interactive section was a case of active learning. It allows audience members to form their own opinion on the shared big choice that was going to happen on the meta-narrative level afterwards. And the question was, how do we restore order in this, even though it's fictional, but in this chaotic reality? That's the big choice: collective disruption of the meta story. Which god do you side with? And not only that, but how do you collaboratively then rewrite the ending based on what this god wants? And then, we had an outcome, depending, which was super flexible. We had certain endings, like paper parrot, and certain, we were very modular about it. So we would always perform this. We would perform this off stage, so we would be using sound effects, because sometimes we would get audience members that have very interesting ideas of what should be happening to these gods, which we could not ethically have our actors do. So sound effects were involved here. And this way we kind of successfully reconstructed this ancient myth, because at the end, what happened was that most of the time the solutions that the audience would suggest were in line with the original outcomes and the original rituals in the original texts. So we were basically creating this microcosm of collaborative decision making. And while it was not like prescribed, it was broadly similar, the outcome, which was really beautiful because it means that I was able to take the messages of this myth and apply it in a new interactive way. And we basically reenacted our ancient ritual. So, summary. How can I develop a version of a ritualistic procedure that explores the balance and restoration of order and chaos for a contemporary audience? Some takeaways here, I would say, is that onboarding really is your best friend. Spend a lot of time doing that so that people understand what is expected of them, but also that they have a clear expectation of what is going to happen. Structure your piece carefully by using layered narratives. I'd say balance linear content with hubs of interactivity so that you can test how much people have taken away from the information that you've given them, but also to provide agency. Give the audience clear roles, tasks, and goals to avoid content overwhelm. And use a facilitator as a neutral party because they can act as a bridge between the known and the unknown, and this helps to avoid feelings of inadequacy that could break immersion. Some future goals. I want to scale up. I want to lock in the audience role even more clearly. Specifically the role of the sons of Illuyanka, because we spent a lot of time working on the helpers, but the other side, I think we can really ramp up that conflict, increase the dramatic tension or dramatic intensity of some major plot beats, and invest in ambient activities and scenography. And we can only figure out what our priorities really are by doing more banquets, which we will do at the Camden Fringe Festival, I think, which is in August. Thank you.
If you want to do one or two questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question. So this is like a murder mystery, but the mystery is who dies at the end.
No.
It's like a mystery party, right? But it's like the decision at the end. So how is it different? Like,
I mean, I guess there is not a murder mystery in the sense that we're not figuring out who did it. We are kind of taking this. We're starting with the fact that Illuyanka's or Inara's father has been murdered, and she is devastated about that, and she wants to undo that. And so she wants the help of the audience members to punish Illuyanka and then bring her father back to life in that sense. So it's
that's like murder.
Hmm?
Like murder. How do we bring it back?
Yeah.
I never thought about it in that way, but I do love murder mysteries. So. Yeah.
How much from like a design standpoint is exposed to people during the onboarding? Like, do you tell people you're going to be making a specific choice, that's the mechanic for that choice, or is it kind of done more fictionally than like above the actual improvisation?
Yeah, so I think I told them 3 times, hold on to these tokens. You can only have one, and the snake is treacherous and might try to steal them from you. But I didn't tell them if you let the snake steal your token, then you will cause chaos in the world and Inara will die. So I explicitly hinted at it.
What did you find most like helped players get in that headspace to participate and get over any anxiety or shyness around the immersive theater and the participatory aspect?
Do you mean in the social sense of are you talking about like role playing or
Or kind of any design decision you made, either like in the onboarding or otherwise, to kind of like set the mood on this, and just like get folks ready to participate.
So this is, I think, why we staggered the interactivity really slowly. So this is why the facilitator, we had this slow transition into my own role, but then we also had we had the 2 actors. I introduced the actors, and one of the actors was already sitting at the end of the table, Inara, in her in her regular clothes, like she was not in her role yet. She was just hanging out with the people, to already establish like a bond. And then once we started the actual scripted part of the show, she would like put on her clothes and change like her whole attitude, and then she has like a 5 to 10 minute section where she starts speaking to audience members in her role, and she says, you know, she's basically giving the quest to the audience, is like, well, this happened and I need you to help me. And we tend to find one audience member that is clearly like really engaged and would be willing to participate, and she's like looking for her one special helper, who is the real Hupasha, who gets this really specific task of, you're my special helper. This rope, once Illuyanka is drunk, you have to tie him up. Not that we're actually doing that, but like we focus this on this one person who is willing to do that, because they can say no. Like if they don't want to do it, it's fine. And then we also introduce Illuyanka a little later, and they have like a 5-minute discussion with each other at the table. So we are already sitting at the same table that these gods are having discussion at. And then Illuyanka says something in the lines of, you call this a party? You invited me to this shit show of a party. Let's push all the tables to the side and start dancing. And we're not actually dancing, but we will push the tables to the side and we start mingling. And we were thinking of actually using like networking techniques, like doing like a speed dating thing or something. But by then, I think we've really brought people into actively participating. So, yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have in this slot, but we can get another round of